There's a thing called lights. And there's a thing called action camera. What do you want?
My entire thing is about 20 pounds.
Any more? Okay. Ready to rock and roll. Is this, we got this for any reason? Turn that off.
Basically, we've decided to do race, and we have a range of questions that aren't necessarily related to one another. So don't be surprised if we get changes. Yeah, if it changes from one angle to the next. So Ken.
Okay, so our first question is, do you think people favour their own ethnicities? So as an example, I went to BBC and all the Asian kids hung around together. So that's one example. So do you guys have an opinion on that question?
Maybe hands up for yes if you do think.
Or do you think ethnicities
favour their
own?
With some, yes. Yeah. Majority thinks yes.
Everyone.
And who doesn't?
Can anyone say why they think, or give a story about?
You can look at the front of this building, like during most hours, and it's all the, different internationals, well, a lot of them anyway, hang around together. And then you can just look at community, like in the bigger community and stuff like that, enclaves like Sunday and stuff like that.
Do you think people have an interest in favouring people from
I think it's
economic
more,
or social?
You hang around what you're comfortable with, stay within your comfort zone.
And so why do you think people, especially maybe Gen Y, aren't comfortable with people from other races?
I don't think it's a Gen Y issue at all. I think it's just a...
But if we use the uni as an example, and you see...
I think it is, but it is actually a taboo to, if you went back maybe 20 years, people would be more vocal about the fact that, people come into my country and they're all hanging around with each other, not accepting our culture. But now we just don't really talk about it because everyone's accepted and it's a multicultural society, but people still go out into little cliques. So I do think it's an issue with Gen Y because no one's saying anything.
I don't think it's a race thing, I think it's more a culture thing. I have friends who are Filipino and stuff, and it's not a big deal because we're very similar upbringings and stuff like that. But I don't have too many friends who weren't born in Australia. It's not because I don't want to hang out with them or anything. I just don't think we don't have a shared knowledge or something maybe that they don't I'm not invited to their clique, they're not invited to mine.
Would you say that having the same accent is important?
I was going to say that language barrier can actually play a part sometimes. I've been in a country where I don't speak the language very well, and it makes it sort of hard to just even have the confidence to try and talk to someone when you know that your language skills are pretty crappy and you can't talk about things that you would really want to anyway. So it's sort of easier to hang around with people that, communication is just a lot easier and it's easily different.
And it's not just language, but dialect as well. Different ethnic groups and social groups even speak different dialects of English, so even though we speak the same language, it's not necessarily entirely mutually comprehensible. So little differences in that. And it's not something that people really notice, but when you talk to someone who doesn't speak the exact dialect of English that you do, you feel uncomfortable and out of place. So it kind of deters you from hanging out with them.
It's not the same humour and, sarcasm. I mean, if you speak to someone from, say, Germany whose second language is English and your first language is English, it just isn't the same as talking to someone who's on their first language.
But even if your first language is both English, it's not necessarily the same English.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on, our second question, when we focused a little bit on this in our survey, it's about Muslim religious dress, kind of as an indicator of a racial background. Hands up those people who, when they see a woman dressed in religious dress, it catches their eye.
I grew up with it.
So right up. So a third.
Do you mean the full thing or just a...
Well, anything. Yes, if you see a woman wearing...
I'd say the full, I don't know what the full thing is called. It's not called...
Abaya. It's actually called abaya. Burqa is only in Iraq.
So what about people who people, when they see a woman wearing the full, that it catches their eye?
Are you talking like a nun as well, like, or just Muslim?
Well, anything.
Do you mean like it catches your eye in a very neutral way, or it catches your eye in a positive or negative way?
Well, neither. Just like your natural
Just
reaction
makes you
is to look at that. Yeah. Basically, what we wanted to know is, why would you think people in Gen Y would be hesitant about religious dress? We've seen in Belgium and France the polemic that it's causing.
Just the stigma attached to particular religions and places in the world, like fundamentalism and everything, you know. Maybe people just don't
Can I just
want
interrupt for a moment? Sorry, I was getting some chest representation.
maybe they just don't want people to judge them based on whatever they're seeing on the news. And, you know, people can be like that if they're ignorant and they don't know about a culture. So maybe just don't put a label on yourself and people have the opportunity to judge you for no reason.
And why do you think Gen Y in particular would feel that way when people say, you know, Gen Y is the most open-minded, culturally accepting? Why would you think that Gen Y would have an issue?
So, do you mean like with other people wearing it, or do you mean wearing it themselves?
Other people wearing it, like what you see in France and Belgium at the moment.
I don't know. I do have an issue with it.
Oh, there was a pretty big issue there. Maybe it's because they don't want anyone to impose views on anyone else. Or they felt like people were trying to preach. Maybe that isn't very open-minded. Maybe that's oppressive in a way, just saying, well, I'm better than you because I'm wearing this.
Does anyone feel that it's a little bit of a taboo to talk about Muslim religious dress? Hand up. And why would you think that in Australia it was a taboo, whereas in France and Belgium they've debated it, had public discussions and uproar?
It makes, if you mention anything like that, it makes you look racist. Because I know, I saw these two Muslim women in the full dress walk towards each other, and they recognised each other. And I was just floored by that. I couldn't believe. And I mentioned it later on to someone, like, how did they recognise each other? And this person looked at me. This person looked at me like, that's really racist. I'm like, how is that racist? Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's a fear of being labelled as racist.
Politically incorrect. Everyone is afraid to talk about anything.
Maybe it's because the French and Belgian people, I don't know, the Belge, have a different taboo system to us. Like they're happy to talk about their president sleeping with like multiple women. You know, it's fine in France, but in Australia it's not. So maybe, I think they just have a different sense
Is
of.
there anybody here from France who wants to defend the integrity of the?
They wouldn't defend it.
The Prime Minister went to a strip club, guys. Calm down.
One last question in this regard. Do you think that, to say in France has a bit of a reputation for being racist, and Australia does too in different regards? Do you think that Australian society is hesitant and rejects the fact that there's elements of racism here and we don't want to recognise?
Australia likes to think it's really multicultural.
We've been brought up like the whole we're the big melting.
Yeah.
I can't remember which one now. But obviously we're meant to have that mentality, so we're meant to be accepting of everyone, and so there are people like these little crews that go out and get Southern Cross tattoos everywhere, and
You know, France.
all that kind of stuff, just to make themselves like they're made in Australianness, but on the surface they'll still be accepted, except for Cronulla riots.
Yeah.
But the Belgian thing wasn't necessarily religious, though. It was more to do with the fact that they were hiding their faces, and it was the equivalent of walking into a shop with a balaclava on. So it was more to do with being able to recognise the women, like their identity. So I think, like, I'm not bothered by the religious symbol of it. I think I'd be more, if I was, like I'm not, but if I was to be bothered by that sort of thing, it would be more because I'm a very physical communicator, and you can't see their facial expressions or something like that. So.
Okay, right. We'll move on to the next question.
The next question is, do you think the increase in immigrants are a possible threat for you in the work environment? And does this create animosities or resentment from you towards immigrants?
And just quickly, this is kind of in regard to the projections of 35 million people by 2050 and the fact that